Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt is a raw, hilarious, and deeply emotional memoir chronicling the author's journey through the ranks of the British National Health Service, NHS, from wide-eyed medical student to burnt-out obstetrics and gynecology registrar. Presented as a series of diary entries, Kay offers readers a deeply personal, unfiltered view of life inside a modern hospital system, illuminating both the triumphs and the traumas that define the profession. Beyond humor and heartbreak, the book is a searing indictment of systemic failures in the NHS and a heartfelt plea for greater empathy toward those working on the front lines of medicine. Overview and structure. Kay begins by explaining that these are real diary entries he kept during his medical training and service, starting from his earliest days as a house officer to his final days before resigning. He provides context for each phase, ensuring the reader understands the medical roles, NHS bureaucracy, and the psychological and physical toll taken on junior doctors. From emergency deliveries to catastrophic bleeds, from life-saving moments to helplessness in the face of death, Kay's entries blend clinical detail with dark wit, human empathy, and growing disillusionment. Lessons and key points. 1. The human cost of medicine. The central theme throughout the book is that medicine is not merely a job. It's a calling that comes with severe personal consequences. Kay recounts missed birthdays, broken relationships, physical exhaustion, and a complete erosion of his personal life. Sleep-deprived and overworked, he reveals how junior doctors are pushed to their limits and often blamed when systemic cracks show. 2. Medicine is undervalued and misunderstood. Kay's frustration peaks as he observes how little the public, and more dangerously politicians, understand the reality of hospital work. The book emerged in response to political attacks on junior doctors, and Kay seeks to set the record straight, revealing how a single doctor is often responsible for hundreds of patients overnight, with little rest or support. He highlights the absurdity of a system that relies so heavily on goodwill and unpaid overtime. 3. Empathy and humor as coping mechanisms. Even in the darkest moments, Kay finds room for levity. His diary is peppered with laugh-out-loud anecdotes, patients inserting odd objects into their bodies, misunderstandings with colleagues, or the occasional absurd bureaucratic blunder. This humor is not trivial, it's a shield. It's how he copes with watching patients suffer, with grieving families, and with his own mounting emotional burden. 4. The beauty and brutality of obstetrics. Kay's specialization in obstetrics and gynecology serves as both the most rewarding and the most traumatizing chapter of his career. Delivering healthy babies brings genuine joy, but it is paired with devastating losses, stillbirths, emergency C-sections gone wrong, and the lives of mothers slipping away due to unpredictable complications. These entries reveal how high the stakes are and how unforgiving failure can be. 5. Professionalism versus emotional detachment. Kay reflects on the emotional contortions required to maintain professionalism while dealing with constant trauma. Whether it's breaking bad news or handling bizarre emergencies, he wrestles with the line between detachment and compassion. Eventually, this tightrope becomes unsustainable. He is unable to remain untouched by the grief, guilt, and moral injury that accumulate with each shift. 6. The invisibility of doctors' suffering. What becomes clear is that doctors are often left without support. There are no debriefs after horrific shifts. There's little time to grieve, and psychological help is rarely offered or accepted. Kay's own breakdown comes after a tragic delivery, which results in the death of a baby and a life-altering lawsuit. This event, and the lack of emotional support that followed, leads to his eventual resignation. 7. The loss of passion and identity. Kay's story is not just about a career. It's about identity. Being a doctor consumed his life and defined who he was. When he leaves the NHS, it's not just a resignation, it's an existential rupture. He grapples with feelings of guilt, fear of judgment from his family, and a sense of failure, even though the system failed him. 8. Bureaucracy and systemic inefficiencies. Throughout the book, Kay reveals countless examples of NHS inefficiencies. Outdated computer systems, dangerous understaffing, absurd scheduling, and the reliance on the unpaid heroism of junior staff. He emphasizes that while the NHS is treasured by the British public, It is severely underfunded and unsustainably run. 9. Respect for nurses and multidisciplinary teams. Kay often praises the nurses, midwives, and allied health staff who hold the hospital together. Despite the focus on doctors, he's quick to acknowledge that patient care is a team effort. He's also candid about the snobbery and hierarchy that persists in hospitals, especially from senior doctors toward more junior ones. 10. The culture of silence and shame. The pressure to never admit error or weakness is pervasive. Kay highlights a culture where asking for help is stigmatized, and where burnout is seen as a personal failure rather than an institutional flaw. This silence causes suffering to go unnoticed until it's too late. 11. Patient-centered medicine and its limits. Despite everything, Kay always centers his patients. He is deeply moved by their vulnerability and touched by their stories. But he also notes how frequently doctors must prioritize systems over individuals, and how patients themselves can sometimes be adversarial, misinformed, or abusive. 12. Why he quit and why it still hurts. The most sobering chapter is the final one, the aftermath. Kay resigns after a particularly traumatic incident, unable to continue. He ends the book with an open letter to the Secretary of State for Health, advocating for junior doctors and demanding systemic change. His grief and bitterness are palpable, not just because of what he endured, but because he still loved the work itself. He didn't stop caring. He just couldn't survive the caring any longer. This action plan is designed for healthcare professionals, administrators, and policymakers who want to improve the conditions faced by medical staff, prevent burnout, and strengthen the structure of patient care systems. It also includes personal steps for doctors in the system who wish to stay resilient while delivering high-stakes care. For healthcare systems and policymakers. 1. Reform working conditions. Implement mandatory limits on weekly work hours to comply with the European Working Time Directive, with real enforcement and transparency. Introduce structured rest time, including protected breaks and minimum on-call recovery periods. Create shift coverage buffers to prevent last-minute cancellations and make room for personal emergencies or mental health days. 2. Expand mental health and debrief services. Establish mandatory debriefing protocols after traumatic events such as patient deaths, emergency surgeries, or clinical errors. Provide confidential mental health services for junior doctors and normalize their use without career repercussions. Launch peer support groups and offer trauma-informed counseling, especially in specialties prone to emotional injury, e.g., obstetrics, emergency medicine. 3. Restore clinical support infrastructure. Rehire experienced medical secretaries and reduce reliance on inadequate automated systems that undermine communication quality. Improve digital systems to reduce time spent on documentation and facilitate faster, more accurate patient handovers. 4. Address doctor-patient dynamics. Launch a public campaign to educate patients about the demands of hospital medicine and the importance of respectful, realistic expectations. Protect frontline staff with zero-tolerance policies for abuse, including verbal threats and assaults, with immediate administrative backing. 2. For hospitals and clinical leadership. 1. Normalize help-seeking behavior. Leaders should model vulnerability and share their own struggles with stress and mistakes, reframing help-seeking as strength, not weakness. Include burnout training and psychological safety in medical education, leadership courses, and clinical rotations. 2. Balance clinical responsibility. Reduce the patient-to-doctor ratio on night shifts, especially for new doctors, and ensure support is always physically present. Develop clearer escalation ladders so junior staff know when and how to seek help without shame or delay. 3. Celebrate wins and recognize emotional labor. Create space during ward meetings to acknowledge small victories, personal sacrifices, and milestones, both clinical and emotional. Offer annual wellness stipends or time-off incentives for those regularly working high-stress roles, labor ward, A&E, ICU. 3. For junior doctors and healthcare professionals. 1. Build resilience proactively. Schedule weekly decompression time to process cases emotionally, through writing, counseling, or private reflection. Maintain a supportive community outside medicine to preserve personal identity and prevent career from consuming self-worth. Keep a private success log of patient cases you feel proud of to counterbalance critical incidents and institutional criticism. 2. Set personal boundaries early. Refuse to overextend beyond safe limits, even when guilt or pressure mounts. Discuss fair rota assignments and negotiate time off well in advance to protect essential life events. 3. Learn the power of no. Resist guilt-based manipulation to work overtime without support or clear rationale. Understand that self-preservation is not selfish. It's essential for patient safety in the long run. 4. Seek mentors, not just managers. Align with someone who understands your personal and professional growth goals. Use mentors for career navigation, emotional processing, and life beyond clinical decisions. 4. For medical education institutions. 1. Revamp the application and selection process. Prioritize emotional resilience and ethical reasoning over superficial extracurricular checkboxes. Include psychological readiness assessments in medical interviews and offer pre-training for trauma management. 2. Teach real-world medicine. Introduce modules on hospital politics, systemic dysfunction, medical error, and burnout as early as the first year. Make reflective practice an evaluated part of training, not just a portfolio filler. Conclusion. The overarching takeaway from this is going to hurt is that systems cannot continue to operate by relying on the unpaid, unsupported sacrifice of emotionally battered professionals. Healing the healthcare workforce begins with rebuilding trust, enforcing humane limits, and restoring the dignity of those who serve others under impossible conditions. This action plan must be treated not as optional but as essential, because the cost of inaction is measured not just in attrition, but in lives.